Why is China building a military base in Djibouti? In the African nation of Djibouti, China has installed its first ever overseas military installation. The base is strategically situated close to the Middle East, the Suez Canal, and other maritime trade routes. China insists that the base will provide logistics and supplies to Chinese ships in the area. Analysts contend, however, that China wants to expand its influence globally. Welcome to this video. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to our channel and turn the notification bell so you'll get notified every time we upload a new video. In Eastern Africa, just northeast of Ethiopia and on the coast of the Red Sea, lies the tiny nation known as the Republic of Djibouti, only the size of New Jersey or North Macedonia. With not even 1 million people, this little nation has an outsized role in world geopolitics. Djibouti might be small, but it is hardly the butt of any jokes as nations attempt to further spread out there. Djibouti's outsized importance in global geopolitics, like many in its circumstances, can be drawn pretty much entirely to its location. Djibouti is located not far from one of the busiest and most important waterways in the world, sought after by many nations, ever since people started using it for world trade. That waterway is the Suez Canal, around 1,600 kilometers to the north. But Djibouti also sits right beside another important waterway, one perhaps equally as important to this part of the world, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait. Securing the security of the canals is crucial for all nations over the world, unless they're stopping in Sudan or Saudi Arabia, or unless they're a magnet for different nations looking to build military bases in the region, as practically every ship passing through the Suez Canal will likely also pass through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, unless they're stopping in Sudan, Saudi Arabia, or somewhere similar. As of October 2021, China, France, Italy, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and the United States all have some kind of military presence inside their borders. French bases also house Italian and German troops, and Camp-la-Montier in the US also has British troops. The country's proximity to hotspots like Yemen, Somalia, South and Southwest Sudan, as well as the Bab el-Mandeb Straits, account for the establishment of so many foreign military bases there. The US has leased Campbell Tower, which is close to the Djibouti International Airport, since 2002, primarily because of this. Logically, Somali piracy is another major issue in the area, because Somalia lacks a stable central government and a navy to protect its waters. Local fishermen have had to band together to protect themselves. Some of these groups eventually realized how profitable it was to demand ransoms, which has led to the situation we are in today, with potentially vulnerable sea lanes. Okay, so that was probably a very oversimplified explanation of how the issue began. But China has also established a base nearby that is only 6 kilometers from the US base. Does this sound like a problem to you? However, let's get into it. This puts the United States and many of its closest allies in the awkward position of having military bases in the same nation or even in the same city as a Chinese base. From here, we can also see them. You know, I think China may be onto something. With what China has specified with the base, which is to combat the aforementioned threat of piracy in the Gulf of Aden to the south and protect the also crucial Bab el-Mandeb Strait. The People's Liberation Army base, along with all the investment in various infrastructure projects in the area, helped to firmly establish China's economic and political influence in Africa. It is China's first permanent military base outside of China. The railway that connects Djibouti to Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, is one of the country's most notable features. Ethiopia, a landlocked country, can now travel from Djibouti to the sea more easily thanks to China. With the completion of the Addis Ababa-Djibouti railway in 2018, which was largely constructed by Chinese labor. Although the railway hasn't yet lived up to its potential, many believe that it will, as Ethiopia's population continues to soar over the coming decades and becomes effectively Djibouti's gateway to Ethiopia. The real question here is, why is Djibouti not one of the richest nations in this region of the world, given its strategic location, the obvious significance of global trade, and all the nations willing to cooperate with it? In a way, I'm wondering why Djibouti isn't basically just a carbon copy of Singapore, given that 23 people there live in extreme poverty, and 41% of the country's population lives in poverty. Djibouti's location is essentially its only significant economic asset. Only a tiny 0.04% of the nation's land is arable due to dry, arid climate. The two biggest clans in the nation, the Afars and the Isas, also engaged in the bloody civil war that left much of the country's agricultural infrastructure in ruins from 1991 to 94. In a sense, very few people would actually want anything to do with the country if it were situated pretty much anywhere other than this specific location. The strategic location of the country is what attracts bigger nations. Djibouti President Ismail Omar Kelle, who first came to power in his fifth term in office after taking office in 1999, has been accused of being a dictator, known for imprisoning opposition leaders and expelling foreign observers. Despite this, the country ultimately wants to become the Dubai of Africa, and with their economy projected to grow by 9% in 2023, Djibouti is on track to achieve this goal. As a result, many have criticized much of what we discussed, especially the Gulf states' desire for closer ties with China, saying that it all serves to stabilize the current regime rather than the nation as a whole. Furthermore, many claim that the world's most powerful nations have a vested interest in maintaining the status quo because the government of Djibouti has made it possible for them to host military bases in this crucial region, which would be very challenging otherwise. In either cases, Djibouti will undoubtedly be a hot topic in the coming decades. China has been actively involved in Djibouti's infrastructure and livelihood projects in recent years. There's been an increase in both bilateral trade and investment between the two countries. Djibouti has also developed into a significant entry point for Chinese goods into the East African market, as well as a crucial port for Chinese Navy escort fleets to rest and resupply. This friendly connection was established in 1979. As early as 1979, Djibouti and China became close friends, just 2 years after Djibouti's independence. Since then, the alliance has steadily grown and deepened, and today Djibouti and China are experiencing their closest ties ever. Djibouti collaborates extensively with China. China is a world leader in infrastructure, including ports, railroads, and roads, as it is well known. Currently, China is Africa's largest trading partner. China's foreign policy has always placed a high priority on African nations. The Asian country has a solid track record of helping Africa. Djibouti's president says his nation is proud to collaborate with the Asian economic juggernaut China, noting that the two are jointly supporting infrastructure projects and helping to develop local economies across the continent. The Chinese government has offered scholarships to numerous students from Djibouti since 1986 and has dispatched medical teams to the African nation since 1980. The two nations have agreed to promote mutual assistance and support in international affairs, fostering successful cooperation and deep friendship based on a win-win principle. Looking back into 2017, things were more different when the military base of China was not yet installed officially. Now, between all the countries stationed in Djibouti, there's been a lot of military cooperation in the past, with the exception of Japan. They are all NATO members, and Japan itself has been involved in NATO missions in the past. Therefore, the density of countries stationed here has not caused problems in the past. In recent years, however, that has changed. Since mid-2017, according to the Pentagon, Chinese lasers were pointed at US pilots, potentially blinding them and endangering their safety. And China disagrees with this allegation. This activity poses a threat to our flyers, says the US. After investigations, the US was told that the alleged is absolutely untrue. China, on the other hand, accuses Japan of having sent divers to a Chinese military ship to collect information. This accusation is denied by the Chinese in response to the Chinese base. Japan has leased additional land from the Djibouti government in order to increase their own base for China. The base marks a big step, because this is the first foreign base and it is part of their large-scale Belt and Road strategy. The Chinese government invests in infrastructure projects in structurally weaker countries. These investments are coordinated to form a trade network tailored towards China, and the growing Chinese influence in Djibouti is evident in a number of projects. Ever since 2004, the Djibouti government has contracted a Dubai-based company, DP World, to construct and manage the container port. In 2013, however, the government of Djibouti sold a large portion of the country's shares in the port to the Chinese merchant Port Holdings. This disappointed DP World, which in turn sparked a protracted dispute. In the end, the contract was completely terminated with DP World by nationalizing the port and giving China Merchants Port control of the container port. A deal was also made with China Merchants Port Holdings to build a brand new multi-purpose port, which will turn the nation into a regional logistics hub. Djibouti has given 80% of its infrastructural projects to China. Critics fear that Djibouti will fall victim to a Chinese death trap. This is what happened in Sri Lanka with the construction and financing of Hanbin Tata Port by Chinese firms, which led to a sizable debt between Sri Lanka and China. The government ultimately came to an agreement in which they leased the port to China for 99 years in order to pay off their debt because they were unable to settle the debt. As a result, China took complete control of the port, increasing its geopolitical influence in the Indian Ocean. The fact that 77% of Djibouti's step was financed by Chinese money, that 77% of Djibouti is financed by Chinese money, and that 77% of Djibouti's government's power comes from China. Now, do you see one of the many reasons why China is focused on Djibouti? However, an enhanced Djibouti's status as a logistics hub, so Chinese investment might also be a win-win scenario in this regard. But then, there is still controversy regarding China's intentions, with the United States particularly criticizing China, as if they were better. Chinese investment does have the potential to address Africa's infrastructure gap, but its approach has led to mounting debt. It also uses impervious contracts, predatory loan practices, and corrupt deals that entangle nations in debt and undermine their sovereignty. However, I want to emphasize that by establishing a logistics base in Djibouti, China is able to carry out its obligations for disaster relief, peacekeeping, and naval protection even more effectively. The US and China, two countries deeply involved in an increasing rivalry, are only 10 kilometers apart in the country of Djibouti, where many other nations are working to bolster the world's power. While the US and the EU collaborate extensively, whether in science, shared investments, or joint military and defense activities, the US and China's relationship is much more tense. There is significantly less collaboration, and the conflicts between the two powers are much more tense. In the upcoming years, it's likely that there will be a lot of discussion about how people ought to interact with one another. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and leave us a comment below and share with us your opinion in the comment section.